Two Dogmas of Empiricism. If you're interested, you can come to my office after you don't take my appointment, and I'll go over the formal logic with you in the middle of the essay. If you like formal logic, it's interesting, but I won't go over it here in class. So the paper is entitled Two Dogmas of Empiricism. A dogma is a belief that you hold without any good reason. There's a technical sense. If you're studying religion, there's a technical meaning to the term dogma, which is different. But in ordinary English, if you say something is a dogma, you mean this is a belief you hold without any good reason. So the paper is Two Dogmas of Empiricism. What is empiricism? Empiricism is a kind of modernism that claims all knowledge comes from sense data. It's a very influential philosophical movement in the English-speaking world. The three classic empiricists in the early modern era are John Locke, Bishop Berkeley, and David Hume. The city in California in the U.S. is pronounced Berkeley, but the name of this philosopher is Berkeley. A lot of English speakers get that wrong too. So these are the classic early modern empiricists. Quine will discuss logical positivism a little bit in Two Dogmas, and that was a 20th century form of empiricism that attempted to show precisely how science could be reduced to sense data. So logical positivism was a movement that tried to show, we're going to show you how all of science can be reduced to just reports of, here's what I see, or here's what I hear, here's what I taste, I smell, I touch. And one of the most famous and most brilliant logical positivists was Rudolf Carnap. Now Bertrand Russell, whom we studied at the beginning of the course, he was our example of a modernist thinker, right? Now Russell was not an empiricist. Why? Well, because Russell believed that our minds are acquainted with not only sense data, but also abstract entities like numbers. So Russell, you'll recall, Russell said that we are directly acquainted with sense data. So I'm directly, the color of my shirt here, the blue of my shirt, you'd say, well, I'm directly acquainted with that. But Russell would say, that's not the only thing you're directly acquainted with. Your mind is also directly acquainted with a number 2, which is a thing distinct from any physical thing. So Russell was more like a Platonist, a follower of Plato in that respect than empiricist. But still, they're both modern. Empiricism and Russell's view are both kinds of modernism. So what are the two dogmas that Quine is going to challenge? Quine writes, modern empiricism has been conditioned in large part by two dogmas, two beliefs that are unjustified, that people accept without reason. One dogma is a belief in some fundamental cleavage. Cleavage is like fundia, chuvia, between truths which are analytic or grounded in meanings independently of matters of fact, and truths which are synthetic or grounded in fact. The other dogma is reductionism, the belief that each meaningful statement is equivalent to some logical construct upon terms which refer to immediate experience. Both dogmas, I shall argue, are ill-founded. That means they're not well-founded. They're badly founded. They have no foundation. So I'm going to explain more clearly what reductionism and the analytic-synthetic distinction is. So don't worry if you're not quite sure what it means yet. So what are analytic versus synthetic truths? Well, the idea is that analytic truths would be things like 2 + 2 = 4. Or the classic analytic truth, pardon me, in Western philosophy is all bachelors are unmarried. Right? Now, what's bachelor mean? It means an unmarried man. So empiricists describe analytic statements as true or false. You can have a false analytic statement. But whether they're true or false, it only depends on the meanings of the words used. So 2 plus 2 equals 4, an empiricist would say, well, what makes that true is the meaning of 2, the meaning of plus, the meaning of equals, the meaning of 4. If you just understand what those words mean, you see that 2 plus 2 has to equal 4. Or, in the case of all bachelors are unmarried, if you understand what the word bachelor means, well, it means an unmarried man. So, of course, all unmarried men are unmarried. Right? So it's true just in virtue of meaning. I'll often say in virtue of because in this context, that's often what you say. So, are true only in virtue of the meanings of the terms. In virtue of doesn't mean because of, due to. It's a fancy way of saying it. So analytic truths are true, like all bachelors are unmarried, only in virtue of, only because of the meanings of the terms. What does terms mean is a fancy word for words. It's a way. So examples of synthetic truths. Pandas are native to China. Native to means this is where you naturally find them. You can find them in Washington, D.C. I think China gave us a couple pandas, but they're not native to the United States. So pandas are native to China. Van Norden is balding. And notice the ing ending makes clear I'm becoming bald, I'm not bald yet, just for the record. That's a little bit of a joke. But it's true. Van Norden is balding. You mean I'm in the process of becoming bald. I'm not there yet. So empiricists claim synthetic statements are verified or falsified by sense data. So you could have a false analytic statement, like if I said, there is a bachelor who is married. That's false. I don't need to look at the world to find out that there's not a bachelor who is married. Why? If you know what the word bachelor means, you know he's not going to be married. On the other hand, if you said, well, actually pandas are native to the American Midwest, I would be very surprised. But I'd say, okay, give me the evidence. And you said, well, look, here's panda bones found deep in the mountains of the American Midwest. They've been living there for thousands of years. They died out, but they were native to the American Midwest. Wow, how about that? That's surprising. So it's a synthetic truth. So that's the distinction between synthetic and analytic. Analytic truth just because of the meaning, synthetic based on sense data. Now, again, just to clarify the difference between Russell and empiricists, the things that empiricists call analytic truths, those examples are also examples of what Russell would call self-evident truths. So Russell would say, 2 plus 2 equals 4 is self-evident. Bachelors are unmarried is self-evident. However, for Russell, self-evident truths are truths about abstract entities, like Plato's forms. If you've read Plato's Republic, or the Meno, that's another, or actually it's in the Meno, I think it's in the Phaedo for sure. So Plato's Republic, the Phaedo, those are dialogues where you get the clear theory of forms. I think it's in the Meno as well. So for Russell, self-evident truths are truths about abstract entities that our minds are directly acquainted with without sense data. For empiricists, analytic truths are true only in virtue of, because of, the meanings of the terms, the words used in the sentence. Okay, so Quine's going to say, well, the belief that there's a distinction between the analytic truths and the synthetic ones, that's just a dogma. It's something people believe, but they have no good reason. So why does he reject it? Well, what he's doing in the middle part of the essay, the really hard technical part of the essay, which again, if you're interested, come to my office hours, I'll go over it as much as you want. But what Quine says is, we have no way of distinguishing between statements that are analytic, in the sense that empiricists talk about, and statements whose truth we're just really committed to. So clearly there are some truths where we say, well, that's got to be true. You can't deny that. But then the empiricists say, well, yeah, there are things that you think, well, that has to be true. I think it has to be true. But then there are analytic truths where, well, they really have to be true because of the meanings of the words. And Quine says there's no way to draw a distinction between things where we say, well, I really think that has to be true. I don't see what you could show me to talk me out of that. And something that's true because of the meanings. Now, why might you think this? Well, here are some examples. Take the statement, Pluto is not a planet. When you first, I don't know how old I am. I mean, I know, but I mean like how old. So, for example, when you were in grade school, were you taught that Pluto is a planet or not? Pluto is, what's it called?
Mingwanxi.
Yeah, say it again.
Mingwanxi.
Yeah, were you taught that it was a planet or not? Well, you must remember. Do you remember?
It's a planet.
You were taught it was a planet when you were in school? Yeah. So, but now we know, astronomers say, oh no, Pluto's not a planet anymore. Now, when people first discovered Pluto, the astronomers who discovered Pluto said, hey, we discovered a new planet. That makes it a synthetic truth. Through observation, they discovered a new planet. If anything counts as a synthetic observation truth, it's discovering planets. Right? When Herschel discovered Uranus, that was an observation, right? So when you discover Pluto, it's a synthetic observation truth. But when scientists said, hey, guess what, guys? Pluto, not a planet anymore. What was that? That was analytic. That was, we decided to not use the word Pluto anymore to refer to the word planet anymore to refer to Pluto. So Quine says, you see, we don't really know how to classify even a statement like Pluto is a planet or Pluto is not a planet. If you asked people 50 years ago, we did. Yeah, I know, because I first did. If you ask people when I was really young, is Pluto a planet? They'd say, of course Pluto's a planet. We can observe it. If you ask astronomers now, they'll say, well, no, you don't understand what a planet is if you think Pluto's a planet. We don't call Pluto a planet. So Quine's saying, it's not like we can say whether Pluto is a planet or Pluto is not a planet is analytic or synthetic. What about the Earth is a planet? You might think, oh, well, that's a synthetic truth. We discovered that. But when part of Kuhn's point is, when people were arguing with Galileo, part of what they said was, planet is from the Greek planetes, meaning wanderer. The planets are the stars that wander among the other stars. The Earth isn't a planet. That if you say the Earth is a planet, you don't know what the word planet means. Right? And now we look back and we say, that's silly. What do they mean the Earth isn't a planet? Right? But for them, that seemed like a thing about what the word planet means. Or atoms are indivisible. You all know this, in means not in English. So atoms are indivisible means atoms cannot be split, they cannot be divided. Synthetic or analytic? Well, when people came up with the idea of atoms, it seemed like it was analytic. If you asked Democritus or Lucretius, ancient Greek philosophers, can an atom be divided? They'd say, no, that's what atoma means. It means can't be cut in Greek. And if you said, yeah, but maybe they can be cut, Democritus or Lucretius would say, you don't understand the theory if you think an atom can be divided. The whole point of atoms is they're the smallest pieces of things. Of course they can't be divided. But now we say, well, of course atoms can be divided. Obviously they can be divided. So, same thing with time is absolute and independent of space. For Newtonians, absolutely true. Part of what time and space mean. For Einsteinians, no. So Quine says the empiricist model of saying, well, there's some things that are true because of what the words mean. There are other things that are true because of observations. Quine says that's not going to do justice to the complexity of how people actually do science or figure things out. Sorry, I'm getting excited, so I'm talking fast. When I first started teaching, I used to talk really, really quickly. In the United States, when I was first teaching, I talked so fast. And the first year I taught, I had a student in my class who was deaf. Right? I don't know in Chinese Sign Language. In English Sign Language, deaf is that. Right? So I had a deaf student in my class. And so she had an interpreter who would sit in the class and translate for her. I can't sign, so this doesn't mean anything, but I'm pretending to sign. So she had an interpreter who would sit in the front, and I would lecture, and I would talk faster and faster and faster. And usually the interpreter would go, just trying to keep up with what I was saying. And it's always hard for her, because I used to talk really, really fast in English. So the first dogma, synthetic analytic, Quine says, there's really not a clear distinction there. That's just a dogma, that there is a clear distinction. Why does he reject reductionism? So reductionism, again, is the view that if you have a statement, a sentence, a jutsu, and it means something, then it has to somehow be about a particular experience, a sensory experience. It doesn't mean anything unless you can reduce it to an experience. So, well, why does Quine reject reductionism? He says, well, first, all efforts so far to reduce science to reports of pure sense data have failed. And he mentions Rudolf Carnap, this famous logical positivist, and he says, Carnap got as close as anybody could, but Carnap was still a long way away from actually doing it. And Quine says it's not just that we're not close to explaining science in terms of sense data. It's that we don't know, even in principle, how to do that. So, what would it be like to reduce science to sense data? That would be something like, well, what is sense data? Something like, red here now, blue there. How do you get from this to oxygen is an element with 8 neutrons? I said it had 7 last time I used that as an example. I'm sorry, I looked it up, it's 8. Oxygen has 8 neutrons. I said 7 electrons. It does have 7 electrons, but apparently atomic numbers are based on the neutrons, not the electrons, so sorry. But anyway, you see, so this is a scientific statement. Oxygen is an element with 8 neutrons. How do you get from red here now to oxygen is an element with 8 neutrons? Carnap tried, and he was a genius, and he failed. So Quine says, we don't know how to reduce meaningful statements to reports of sense data. We're not even close to it. And I would add, even red, like in red here now, is not a pure sense data term. Because the visual spectrum, so in other words, if you look at a rainbow, what's the rainbow? The rainbow is all the different kinds of light that are visible to the human eye. That's the spectrum. The visual spectrum is all the lights, all the colors in the rainbow. It's infinitely divisible. So it's purely conventional where we draw the lines among red, purple, violet, orange, etc. So if we're talking about experiencing, it's still not going to be pure sense data if we say red here now. Because to identify red, we have to make a social convention about, okay, this part of the spectrum is red. This is red. This is orange. This is red. This is purple. This is red. Where do we draw this line? We just decide. It's not a sense data fact where red is. So reductionism is a problem as well. So Quine proposes an alternative picture. And I know it's building up slowly, but I think it starts to get really exciting here when you see what he's doing. So Quine proposes an alternative picture, a different picture of the relationship between experience and truths. And this is at the end of the paper where things start getting exciting. The totality of our so-called knowledge or beliefs, from the most casual matters of geography and history to the profoundest laws of atomic physics or even pure mathematics and logic, is a man-made fabric which impinges on experience only along the edges. Or, to change the figure, to change the metaphor, total science is like a field of force whose boundary conditions are experience. A conflict with experience at the periphery, at the edge, occasions readjustments, changes in the interior of the field. So the totality of our knowledge is like a fabric which touches experience only along its edges. What does that mean? Here's the older empiricist view that Quine is rejecting, the reductionist view. And this part, Russell would agree with. Right? Russell agrees that you have direct knowledge of experiences. It's just he also thinks you know numbers and things. So the older empiricist view is you have an experience, pow, you have a belief associated with that experience. You have an experience, pow, you have a belief associated with that. Experience, belief, one-to-one. Each experience goes with a belief. And if you have a belief that doesn't have an experience that goes with it, it's meaningless. It doesn't mean anything. That's the view Quine is rejecting. What is he proposing instead? Like this. It took me a while to figure out how to make this diagram on my computer. I hope you like it. So this is Quine's view of experience and the web of belief. Web of belief. In other writings, Quine uses the phrase web of belief. And it's very accurate for his view. So the idea is there's experience, and these little arrows represent experience that we're having. And there's just this complete set of experiences, and then we've got a bunch of beliefs. And so among our beliefs, so in this space, we're supposed to imagine all these different beliefs. Some beliefs are out here. They're very close to experience. Other beliefs are in here. They're not very close to experience. But if I ask, what belief goes with this experience? Quine's answer is, well, no individual belief goes with an experience. Our complete web of beliefs adjusts to experience. It's kind of like, here's another metaphor. Imagine like a spider's web. A spider's web. And a fly runs into the spider's web and says, help me, help me. Okay. That's a really funny joke if you know American movies. There's a science fiction movie where a guy gets turned into a fly, and like the climax of the movie is he gets caught in a spider web and he says, help me, help me. And the last thing you hear in the movie is him saying, help me, as the spider comes together. Sorry. So imagine a web, and you have a fly, and the fly comes and runs into the web, okay? And so if you ask, what strand, what thread in the web got the fly? There's no one strand that got the fly. The whole web gets the fly, right? If it weren't for the whole web, the fly wouldn't be trapped. You take away part of the web falls apart. So Quine says, it's not that, oh, here's an experience. It goes with this belief. This belief is only this belief because it's part of this web. Not like the earlier picture where I can say, oh, well, this experience goes with that belief. Because maybe this belief is oxygen is an element with 8 neutrons. What experience goes with that? Quine's going to say the belief that oxygen is an element with 8 neutrons is somewhere in here. It's connected to experience, but not directly. It's just part of the web. That's how it works. So this leads to a rejection of both of the dogmas. If this view is right, it is misleading to speak of the empirical content of an individual statement. Empirical content means the sense data content. What is it you see, hear, smell, taste, touch? If this view is right, it's misleading to speak of the empirical content of an individual statement. That was the second dogma, reductionism. The view that each statement has some empirical content that goes with it. Especially if it be a statement at all remote from the experiential periphery of the field. In other words, if we go back here, if we say, well, what's the experiential or empirical content of a belief here? It doesn't have anything. Technically, this one doesn't either, but at least it's closer to the edge. But I can't assign to any one belief a particular experience. Furthermore, it becomes folly, silliness, craziness to seek a boundary, a dividing line between synthetic statements, pandas are native to China, Van Norden is balding, which hold contingently on experience, which depend on experience, and analytic statements which hold come what may, no matter what, dogma 1. Any statement can be held true come what may. Come what may means no matter what experiences might happen, or no matter what might happen. Any statement can be held true come what may if we make drastic enough adjustments elsewhere in the system. So in other words, if the spider gets stuck in the web, and suppose it starts to break the web, the spider could fix the web in a bunch of ways. You might say, well, maybe I'll add some more threads over here and make this part tighter. Or, I could get the same effect by making it tighter over here. Or maybe I'll tighten both a little bit. Or maybe I'll add a whole new strand right here. All those would work. So any statement can be held true, come what may, if we make drastic enough adjustments, drastic, extreme enough adjustments elsewhere in the system. Even a statement very close to the periphery, this is the periphery, even a statement very close to the periphery can be held true in the face of recalcitrant experience. Recalcitrant means difficult to deal with, hard to get rid of. Any statement can be held true in the face of recalcitrant experience by pleading hallucination or by amending, changing certain statements of the kind called logical laws. He's going to give us an illustration. So here's Quine's model of change in belief. So he was saying a minute ago, look, any statement, first of all, any statement can be held true come what may if we're willing to make other adjustments in the system. What does he mean? So here's a web of belief, and here's experiences. And here's belief 1. Notice it's very close to the periphery. It's close to the edge of experience. This one, it's not quite as close, but it's closer than these two. These two are way in the center. They're far away from experience. Right? So let B1 be, there are houses on Elm Street. And so this belief is there are houses on Elm Street. Elm Street is just a very common street name in small towns in the U.S. There was an Elm Street in my hometown. Just like a standard example. Let B2 be, I am not hallucinating. Right? Hallucination is, I think I looked up, 幻觉. I think that's right, hallucination, 幻觉. 幻觉. Okay, 对不起. 幻觉. It's hallucination, 幻觉. Yeah. So 我没有幻觉. Let B3 be water is H2O. 2 hydrogen molecules, 1 oxygen molecule. B4 is 2 plus 2 equals 4. So now how is this going to work? Well, it's going to give us examples. Well, I'll do the example. It's going to give it, but it helps to do it more than once. So suppose there are normally houses on Elm Street. So we believe B1. We think, oh, there are houses on Elm Street. Why do you think that? Oh, every day I go by Elm Street and there are houses there. But suppose today I go by Elm Street and they're all torn down. I see no houses, they're all torn down. Now you might say, well, I guess you're going to drop this belief, right? That there are houses on Elm Street. Probably I will. But what does Quine say? Quine says, any statement can be held true, come what may, if we make drastic enough adjustments elsewhere in the system. Even a statement very close to the periphery can be held true by pleading hallucination or by amending certain statements of the kind called logical laws. So, we're committed to there being houses on Elm Street. I walk by today, it looks like they're all torn down. Normally you say, I guess we're going to have to give up B1. It's not true there are houses on Elm Street. Right? But what I could do is, I could give up B2. B2 says, I'm not hallucinating. I could say, there are houses on Elm Street, it's just that I'm hallucinating. When I see the houses torn down, that's an illusion. Now, if you saw houses torn down, would you think, wow, I bet I'm hallucinating right now? No, of course not. Why? Quine says, because the belief that you're not hallucinating is closer to the center of your web of beliefs. One of the last things you'll give up is the belief that you're sane. That's right in the center. You're not going to give it up easily. So if you go on Elm Street and the houses seem to be gone, you say, I'm giving up this one. I'm not giving up this one. But not because this one is tied to the experience, it's because this one is deeper in the web of beliefs. Conversely, by the same token, no statement is immune to revision. Revision, change, revision, even of the logical law of the excluded middle, has been proposed as a means of simplifying quantum mechanics. That's the law of the excluded middle. For any proposition or statement P, either P's got to be true or not P's got to be true. It's a basic principle of logic. Russell, in Problems of Philosophy, it's okay if you've forgotten, but he actually says, he mentions this and says, it's a self-evident truth of logic. Quine is correct. People have proposed giving up this principle of logic to make sense out of quantum mechanics, which is an area in physics. I also know logicians, people who study logic, who say we should reject this principle. That's a really unusual view. Most logicians won't say that. But I've met smart logicians who say, yeah, this actually isn't a good rule. I want to do logic without this rule. So Quine's saying anything, even the laws of logic or mathematics, are subject to change. And he says, what difference is there in principle between such a shift and the shift whereby Kepler superseded Ptolemy, or Einstein, Newton, or Darwin, Aristotle? And you've read Kuhn, so this doesn't surprise you at all, this last sentence. So, and actually, Quine and Kuhn were both at Harvard at about the same time. And they knew each other and they talked a lot. And so Quine's saying, look, when we went from, from Ptolemy to Kepler, or from Newton to Einstein, or from Aristotle to Darwin, these were major shifts in our regular belief. How much stranger is it to change even mathematics or logic? Now, but Quine admits, he says, certain statements, though they are about physical objects and not sense experience, seem peculiarly germane to sense experience. Germane means relevant, and in a selective way. Some statements to some experiences, others to others. Such statements, especially germane to particular experiences, I picture as near the periphery. But in this relation of germaneness, of relevance, I envisage nothing more than a loose association reflecting the relative likelihood in practice of our choosing one statement rather than another for revision in the event of recalcitrant experience. For example, we can imagine recalcitrant experiences difficult to deal with, to which we would surely be inclined to accommodate our system by reevaluating just the statement that there are brick houses on Elm Street, together with related statements on the same topic. We can imagine other recalcitrant experiences to which we would be inclined to accommodate our system by reevaluating just the statement that there are no centaurs along with kindred statements. A centaur is a half human, half bull. A centaur is a half human, half bull. And so it's a mythical creature. So in some cases we say, well, there are no centaurs. Some of them we say there are no brick houses on Elm Street. These statements are germane to experience in the sense that we're likely to change them one way or the other based on experience. We're pretty quick to change them. These statements about houses on Elm Street or centaurs are felt, therefore, to have a sharper empirical reference than highly theoretical statements of physics or logic or ontology. The latter statements may be thought of as relatively centrally located within the total network, meaning merely that a little preferential connection with any particular sense data obtrudes itself, inserts, or becomes relevant. So again, let's go back to this example. There are houses on Elm Street. I'm not hallucinating. Water is H2O. 2 plus 2 equals 4. This belief is very germane to experience. What does that mean? Just that it's close to the edge of experience. Just that if experiences come up, we might be very likely to give this up. This belief is less germane to experience. All it means is we are less likely to give this up on the basis of new experience. These beliefs about water and mathematics, not very germane to experience. All it means is we're highly unlikely to give them up in the basis of. So again, suppose there used to be houses on Elm Street, but one day I go there and see the houses have been torn down. Quine would say that B1, there are houses on Elm Street, is more germane to experience than B2, B3, or meaning only that we're more likely to change our belief in B1 in the face of recalcitrant experience than we are B2, B3, or B4. However, in the face of the same recalcitrant experience, we could keep our belief in B1, but stop believing in B2. I could choose to do that. And Quine would say, that's not a mistake in terms of empirical content. It's not that the statement there are houses on Elm Street is uniquely connected to some sense data. It's just that we don't tend to throw out the belief that we're sane first. We throw out other beliefs first. Furthermore, traditional empiricists would say that B3, water is H2O, is a synthetic truth. Somehow it's based on sense data. Which again, not clear how to get it just from sense data, but it has to be according to traditional empiricism. while B4 is an analytic truth, 2 plus 2 equals 4. But Quine's going to say they're not different in kind, B3 and B4. All that's distinctive about them is they're very close to the center of the web of belief. We don't want to give them up easily. Now at this point, Quine's language gets a little harder, but this is really eloquent English. It's really lovely English. And I know it's hard. It's kind of like when I read Hulomung. I've read Hulomung in translation in English, and I really loved it. I've read parts of it in the original Chinese, but it's really hard for me, Hulomung, because I wasn't Chinese. And it's really beautiful Chinese, and I can kind of feel it's beautiful, but it's hard for me to read too. So it's the same thing. I know this is hard, but trust me, it's really elegant English. And that's an interesting thing about Quine as a writer. Sometimes he's so technical. He's a logician and a mathematician, and he can be so technical. And then all of a suddenly, he's just these beautiful English expressions. Wow, where did that come from? He says, as an empiricist. So he says he's still an empiricist. He just wants to get rid of the dogmas of empiricism. As an empiricist, I continue to think of the conceptual scheme of science as a tool, ultimately, for predicting future experience in the light of past experience. Physical objects are conceptually imported into the situation as convenient intermediaries, not by definition in terms of experience, but simply as irreducible causes, comparable epistemologically to the gods of Homer. So what is Quine saying here? He's saying that in terms of our knowledge of them, the gods of Homer and atoms are on the same level. Neither one of them is something we directly observe. They're both things that we posit, that we postulate, that we just assume exists. Why? Because it makes it easier for us to predict future experiences in the light of past experiences. So the gods of Homer and atoms are both just tools for predicting experiences. We'll take a quick break.